Hello, I hope you've been having a nice day. We're on to chapter 4 now, which is the land of the Nile. If you remember, at the end of the last chapter, they'd just gone to visit their mother in the nursing home. So, chapter 4. The children were in the playroom. Peter was frowning over his book. Sheila was knitting something that she hoped would turn into a jumper when it was finished. Humphrey was absorbed in a jigsaw puzzle of the world, and Sandy was tidying her own particular cupboard in the hope of finding an odd sweet or two that might have slipped down a crack. Suddenly, Peter closed his book with a bang. "Who cares a bean about the land of the pyramids?" he demanded crossly. Sheila looked up and dropped a stitch. "Why on earth should you?" she asked. "We've got to write an essay on Egypt this term. Holiday work. School tomorrow, and I haven't read a word, and I don't want to either." Humphrey fitted a piece carefully into his puzzle. Then he looked up. "Let's go to Egypt and find out something about it," he suggested. "Jolly good idea," exclaimed Peter, and banged his book on the table. "Do! Oh, let's!" cried Sheila, dropping her knitting. Sandy glanced up at the cuckoo clock on the wall. "It's nearly lunchtime," she said, picking some fluff off an acid drop she had discovered. "Greedy little pig," cried Peter. "It's only 11. Look here, Huff, go down and ask Cook to pack us something nice for lunch. She'll do it for you. She likes you best, heaven knows why. Still, there's no accounting for tastes. Tell her we're off for the day. Tell her the weather's too gorgeous to be wasted. Tell her we're going back to school tomorrow. Tell her she's the darling of your heart. Tell her whatever you like, only go." And he pushed a somewhat bewildered Humphrey out of the door. In 2 minutes, Humphrey's beaming face reappeared. "She says all right," he announced. "What's she going to give us?" asked Sandy with great interest. "Wait and see," Humphrey told her. "Gertrude said she'll bring up the parcels in a quarter of an hour." Sheila wound up her wool, stuck the needles carefully through the ball, and put it away in her work bag. Sandy, after looking to see whether yet another acid drop might not be hidden in a dark corner, cleared up by the simple method of flinging everything back into the cupboard and shutting the door. Humphrey went off to find a handkerchief because he thought it might be a useful sort of thing to have if he was going to be out for the whole day. Yeah, never go anywhere without your hanky. Peter took up the flying boat and rubbed lovingly at its wooden sides with an old silk scarf. Presently, Gertrude's kind face appeared in the doorway. 4 brown paper parcels dangled from her fingers. You can see that there. "Here you are," she said. "Have a good time and make the most of your day, and don't get into mischief." She put the parcels down on the table and came over to where Peter stood polishing the boat. "Pretty, isn't it?" she said admiringly. "It'll take you over the hills and far away," Humphrey said. "You said that once before," Gertrude answered, laughing. "You take care I don't keep you to your word one day." And she gave his arm a little squeeze as she went by. "Well, who's ready?" asked Peter as the door closed behind her. "Me, me, me," cried 3 voices together. "Start her off from the cove?" Peter asked, and the others nodded. It was lovely down on the beach. The sand was hot and wet and ribbed, and there was a gentle breeze blowing. Away at the edge of the sand, the waves were lazily crawling, tipped white with foam. But the children did not even look at the sea. They could think of nothing but the adventure before them. In the shelter of their favourite cove, Peter took out the ship and put it down on the firm sand. "Egypt," he said. The 4 children knelt down and stared with never-failing wonder at the miracle. They could never quite believe it would really happen. But it did happen, and they clambered aboard. It was keen high up in the sky, and the boat tossed a little in the light wind, but presently the wind dropped and the boat flew steadily on. Kneeling over the gunwale, Humphrey was soon lost in the delightful pastime of seeing the countryside spread like a living map beneath them. Sandy was wondering what cook had put in their parcels, and Sheila and Peter were standing together at the golden prow and chatting about what they meant to do. "Pyramids," cried Sheila. "Temples," exclaimed Peter, who had heard about them at school. "Alexandria," whispered Humphrey, still looking downwards. "Or Cairo, or Memphis." "A bazaar," said Sandy happily. "We could buy some Egyptian sweets." "We all seem to want something different," said Peter. "Let's leave it to the ship." It seemed to Peter that the golden boar nodded wisely. Or perhaps it was only the effect of the sunshine streaming across the prow. Up went the ship. "Lotus lilies," said Sheila. "I shall make a wreath for my hair." "Pyramids and mummies," said Peter. "I shall find a heap of gold and jewels and make all our fortunes." "Floods and rice fields," said Humphrey. "I wish they'd let me see how irrigation works." "Funny things to eat," said Sandy. "I wonder what they'll taste like." The ship held a steady course. A cold wind whistled through their hair, and the two girls buttoned up their cardigans. They looked downwards, and there was the grey and choppy sea spread beneath them. Below the magic boat, gulls dipped and soared with the sunlight slanting over their white wings. "The Channel," said Humphrey. "Gosh, if we should fall out." "Rather a high dive," grinned Peter, and grabbed him by the shoulder. Sheila put a protecting arm round Sandy's waist. Far below them, a cross-channel steamer, looking no larger than the tiniest toy, ploughed across the water, leaving a long trail of white in its wake. The flying boat held its course so swiftly that in a little while the steamer was no more than a black speck on the grey water. Suddenly Humphrey called, "Land!" and the others crowded to his side of the boat. The white cliffs of France swung into view. "We're flying across France, and then which way, I wonder?" said Humphrey thoughtfully. "I wish the ship would drop a little so we could see things." Immediately the ship began to drop. Soon the soft, somewhat hazy colours of the landscape began to sharpen and deepen. "Look!" cried Sheila, pointing to a grove of low, grey, twisted trees. "Olives." "Who cares?" said Sandy. "Nasty, bitter things, worse than medicine." Presently the sea lay beneath them once more, only now it was blue as turquoise, with scarcely a ripple to break its glassy surface. "The Mediterranean," sighed Humphrey happily. "Look, there's Sicily," cried Sheila. "I can see Vesuvius. Look, look, I believe it's smoking." "Etna," corrected Humphrey. "Vesuvius is near Naples. And anyway, that's smoke coming from a steamer." "Oh dear," sighed Sheila. "How disappointing. A real live volcano is so romantic." "That depends how near you are to it," grinned Peter. "Goodbye, Greece," cried Humphrey, leaning over the side and waving his hand. "Where?" asked Sandy, rushing round. "Too late," said Humphrey. "The sea's getting bluer and bluer," cried Sheila. "It's like the sapphire in Mother's ring." The ship held its course over the brilliant blue sea. Now and again an island, small and brilliant as a jewel, swung into sight and then away again. "Look," cried Peter suddenly. "I believe we're coming to land." The others looked eagerly in the direction of his pointing finger. At first there was nothing to be seen but a cloud low down on the horizon. Gradually it hardened into flat roofs topped by water cisterns. "Not much to see," said Sandy, staring down at the huddle of low houses staining the blue sky with smoke. "Wait a minute," cried Peter. "That must have been the old part of the town. Look, we're coming to the new bit now." "Gosh, what a city!" exclaimed Humphrey, as the ship sped swiftly over a great and busy town. Modern, streamlined buildings took the sun on their plate glass windows. Even at that distance, the children could see motors, like insects, speeding along the white road. "Might almost be like London," remarked Sheila. "Except for the colours. Did you ever see such blue and white and gold?" "Cairo, I suppose," said Humphrey. "I wish I knew, though." Now they were flying over a level plain, and the children could see that it was richly cultivated, although they could not make out the crops. Here and there rose dark brown mounds of ancient cities. Everywhere the shapely fans of palm trees cut into the fierce blue sky. Now the rich fertile plain seemed to shrink gradually, and now they were flying above a strip of brilliant green, winding like a ribbon through the heart of the desert, which lay glowing and golden on either side. "The brightest green in the world," said Sandy. "The valley of the Nile," Humphrey said softly. "And look, oh look, there's the Nile itself." The children hung breathless, staring down at the dark green water. "Must be full of crocodiles," said Sandy, shivering. East and west stretched the great desert. Here and there, bare yellow rocks stood like solid sunlight against the incredible blue of the sky. "I could go on flying like this forever," said Peter. "I couldn't. I'm hungry," Sandy said firmly. The boat began to drop slowly. The green earth rose to meet them. With a long gliding movement, it slid down by the river. "Good old boar," Peter said affectionately, throwing one arm round the neck of the golden boar. "Well, what now?" "Lunch," said Sandy at once. "Rather," agreed Sheila. "Flying gives me an appetite." They unpacked their parcels and spread out the contents. "Good," said Peter. "Good," said Sheila. "Good," said Humphrey. Sandy said nothing. She was far too busy. This is what Cook had packed: tongue and chicken sandwiches, a big pile, without mustard, 4 nice round tomatoes, the firm kind that don't squelch when you bite into them, 4 sausage rolls, 4 small cream cheeses wrapped in silver paper, 4 large crispy chocolate biscuits, 4 large juicy Jaffa oranges, the kind you can peel easily. For some time there was absolute silence near the river. After a while, Sandy sat back and picked the crumbs from her lap. Then, because she didn't believe in waste, she popped them in her mouth and smiled round at the others. "Cook's a trump," said Peter. "If I find a gold crown," said Humphrey dreamily, "I shall give it to Cook." "I don't think a crown would suit her exactly," remarked Sandy, trying to imagine Cook's red face under a golden crown. "Now, children, no arguing," said Sheila briskly. "What are we going to do?" "The bazaar," said Sandy very quickly. "It's my choose because I said it first." "All right," Peter agreed. He scrambled to his feet. "There's such a lot of things to do. Don't let's waste any time." Sheila said thoughtfully, "I don't think we ought to take the magic ship with us. We might lose it. There must be lots and lots of pickpockets about in bazaars." "No worse than anywhere else, I expect," said Peter, who didn't like parking with his ship even for a moment. "Worse for us if we can't get home again," Humphrey reminded him. "If we lost the ship," added Sandy, turning quite pale, "it would be awful." "Well, what ought we to do?" Peter asked unhappily. "Hide it," Sheila suggested. "We mightn't find it again," said Sandy. "We'd mark the place, silly," Humphrey told her. "Do you really think we ought to hide it?" asked Peter, still troubled. "Honest, I do," said Humphrey, and Sheila nodded. "All right," said Peter at last. "Now that's settled," remarked Sandy. "Let's find the bazaar." Peter took the ship out of his pocket. "To a bazaar," he said, "and please stop a bit of the way outside the town." the ship rose into the air. "There's the town," cried Peter, pointing to his right. And indeed it was plain to see, with the blue smoke rising from the low houses, with here and there a great dome curving white against the deep sky. Now the ship was floating gently above the green ribbon of the Nile. Every now and again the children could see brown Egyptian backs and straw-shaded hats bent low over the young rice, and sometimes a face would lift itself from its work to stare at the strange bright bird flying above in the hot blue sky, such a bird as they had never seen before. At last the ship slowed down, sank gently, and brought them to land in an empty spot a couple of miles from the city gates. "Now let's hide it," said Sheila, as they stood watching the ship grow smaller. The children looked round. It was not an ideal spot for hiding anything. In that smooth sandy stretch one place was too like another. Then Sheila's quick eye caught sight of a half-buried block of stone. "Here," she said. Peter knelt down and dug in the sand with his fingers. He pushed the boat into the shallow hole and covered it up again, blowing the sand over the marks his fingers had made. Then he stood up, carefully measuring the distance from the stone with his eye. "I don't like leaving it," he said, a little troubled. "Much better than having it pinched. Honest it is," Humphrey reminded him, and Sheila nodded in agreement. The 4 children set off along the hot and dusty road. And that's the end of the chapter. Ooh, let's hope they make the right decision by hiding it and not keeping it with them. We shall see. Bye-bye.